So here we are for the second part of this workshop. So we will try to unveil a bit the interconnections here between the tax crime and corruption. They are complex issue, and especially in countries like Denmark, where direct bribes to public officials are not so much the case. So the starting point of this discussion is to try to adopt a broader notion of corruption that look at other phenomena, as it has been mentioned already by Benjamin, regulatory capture, but also state capture, even the political level, and other phenomena like revolving doors. You already said about that. So these are very important elements that have emerged throughout the entire, in all the countries. So this is the problematic aspects that we seen happening all over, including in Italy, and Pietro was there when we were speaking, and it's very difficult to speak about that, but this is what we are trying to let emerge. So let's start with the first set of questions. Now, this first set of questions is about the prevalent practical means by which tax offenders and at the same time intermediaries and other enablers are able to affect, manipulate, and exploit tax administration systems. So this is the realm of regulatory capture. Okay, we are not in the realm of political capture, but regulatory capture. So first of all, according to your experience, and you are very, it's important, even when we speak about experience, this is something important for us because your direct observation in the Danish jurisdiction. What are the categories of professionals that are most likely involved in this kind of regulatory capture scheme? So, for example, bankers, brokers, accountants, internal auditors, external auditors, tax lawyers. So this kind, which one are the most involved and why in Denmark?
So there have been some recent scandals where accountants and tax lawyers have provided advice as to how to limit tax payments. And I think that this, I think it's my impression that this mirrors quite well what's happening in many other jurisdictions, that there's a tax advice industry that I don't know if it is emerging or if it has been there for a while, but it is something that is this tax advice industry is coming under increasing public scrutiny. And I think that some of the cases that Jesper mentioned, where the taxing authorities have started engaging in civil legislation to bring back some of the lost revenue, are examples of this also entering the limelight of the authorities on this area. I think one thing that I think is interesting in one of the recent scandals in the Danish system is that a large part of the scheme was committed by foreign nationals and under the advice of foreign tax accountants. So I don't know. So Jesper, what is the English term for udbytteskat? You're muted.
You're muted, Jesper.
Just find out.
So there's been a recent scandal. And so,
Dividend tax.
Dividend tax. So there was a large scheme in dividend tax that was exploited, where some very, very lucrative tax holes were exploited by foreign nationals and under the advice of of foreign tax lawyers and accountants that allowed a number of people to extract billions from the Danish tax system. And I think it's an interesting example because the fraud was not committed by people who are obliged to pay taxes in Denmark. They were speculated upon by foreign nationals who actually had no interactions before this with the Danish taxing authorities, but they saw the loophole in the Danish system and entered the system and defrauded the Danish state of billions in this way.
This is very, very interesting. And on regulatory capture, Jasper, do you have any comment on it?
No, I feel covered.
Okay, Alex, would you like to comment on this, the importance of regulatory capture from the tax justice network perspective?
Thanks, Costa. Yeah, look, it's an interesting phenomenon. It's one, it's an element of what we've called the finance curse, where your state is relatively dependent on financial services. In the extreme case, somewhere on the edge of being very deeply corrupt, like the British Virgin Islands, but also the UK is so dependent on finance. It has a lot of the same characteristics. I'm not certain to what extent this applies in Denmark, given the diversity, natural resources, and so on. But where you have that dependence, you have, as Ronan Palin has put it, you have commercialized your sovereignty. So you have given up a certain amount of your lawmaking power to the professional services firms with the quid pro quo that they will keep bringing in the business that supports your economy. But of course, what that means is they are inside, that revolving door isn't just something that's happened and is comfortable, it's part of the deal. We give you the power to make sure that we remain an attractive destination for conduit investment, for example, and that takes it away from what people can actually vote for. So the capture is kind of built into the economic structure, and over time you become more dependent on finance, and then it's harder and harder to unravel, regardless of which government comes in. Now, I guess from the outside, perhaps Denmark looks as if it's relatively to the right among EU member states in West and Northern Europe, and you might think that capture will have gone further, but it may be that you'd see it differently, and then actually don't see that as being so strong.
I'm not quite sure that I understand the question. But let me say this, and then you can say, Alex, if it's an answer to the problem that you want to raise. I see a tendency, because Denmark is a very complex and very well regulated, and also system also based on a lot of trust, that when seen from the outside, Denmark is very well organized. We make, and the Danish system makes itself vulnerable, because you can actually use the Danish system to use some and to put some of your activity and it will not be as suspicious as if it's given to other countries. So I think our good reputation also when it comes to tax administration is not necessarily a benefit for us. That's why I also say that if you compare it with tax havens, I think Denmark, because we are so well organized, and also the tax system is so well organized, we can be a haven, and that has something to do with the very close cooperation also on advisors and different kind of businesses. I don't know if that was but that is my immediate reaction when I listen to your question.
That makes absolute sense, and I think the British havens would definitely say that their good governance is something they're selling, and when that's in question, they have trouble. So I think it is very tied up. Yeah, as Dylan puts it, to live outside the law, you must be honest. To offer means to undermine other people's governance, you have to offer good protection to the investor. So good governance is part of your sales pitch, I guess. But thank you.
Fantastic. So let's go to the second question now. Here is, so there is sometimes what emerge very clearly in all jurisdiction is that through the complexity, the tax evasion schemes cannot be perpetrated or when they are not criminalized. So we have, for example, tax avoidance, aggressive tax avoidance schemes, the role of enablers. So basically, we said accountant, lawyers is fundamental to let this happen. And you already covered this a bit. Now, the question here is, how often are these tax-related professionals, auditors and so on, sanctioned and disqualified or actually punished when this is happening? Do you think that the level of investigation in relation to them is sufficient and the sanctions are applied or not? And so what is your perception?
So I don't know if any people in the advice industry has been sanctioned before. But I think the case Jesper pointed out previously that is going before the high courts is quite interesting in this regard.
Yeah, so this case is an innovative case, Jesper. Can be a revolutionary step, do you think? Or because what we experience in all jurisdictions, all of them, they are usually not, investigated and sanctioned. So, do you think that this can change?
I think that that in this context we have this, and as I mentioned before, how to see it: is it courts or is it administrative organizations? And we have a board of lawyers, and we also have a board of the accountants, and closely connection and cooperation with the tax authorities or the judicial system to sanction within the business itself in this cooperative organization. If they fail and if they don't comply, or if they violate, what should you say, standards on good behavior for accountants or for lawyers. So if you go through the practice and also the fines, you will see that every year there are cases. And normally when you see that there are cases and the cases are published, that is always a sign that the system works. Every time you don't see a system with no cases, it's a sign that it doesn't work. And I haven't studied it in closely, but I'm happy to send you to the link here for the one that is, I think, that is most relevant on the accountants, and there you can see and just follow the practice of this administrative board.
Thank you very much. If you can, this will be amazing, because what emerged in all the jurisdiction, more of, that the Bar Association for Lawyers and Accountants Association, they have a potential disciplinary measure, but they usually do not enforce them. So it's the disciplinary measures are quite scant. They're not working so well. So from your perception, besides the case that you have circulated, do you think that the Bar Association are strong enough to punish unethical behavior of tax advisors or not? not yet.
I don't think, basically, in my point of view, the problem does not lie within the advisors. The problem lies within the complexity of the system.
Okay. Okay. Now,
I think if
yeah,
I may,
please.
if I may interject there, because I tend to agree with Jesper in that regard, and I think that that's a very general point, right? I mean, if there were no, if the system was not complex, there would be no basis for the advice industry to exist, right? It exists because there are a lot of gray zones in the rules as they currently work, and that is the basis that they build their business on, right?
Yes, and of course, this will be for the next question, because the complexity itself is a result of discontinuity, but that's a more political capture rather than the regulatory capture. But yes, these are two sides of the same coin. If the system is very complex, you know, the role of advisor is very important, and so on. So they want the system to be complex. So yes, let's look at this in the next question. The last thing about regulatory capture here is one specific issue that emerged very recently in the Netherlands, in the Dutch workshop that we've done, and is in terms of revolving door, the importance of academia. So we have found very difficult, honestly, to have some academics coming here. So you are both academics, so this is very good to have you here. But you know, there was a big reluctance, and some of the elements that may have been emerged is that there is a bit of conflict of interest going on, especially in the tax sector. And in the chat, to everybody, I'm sharing something that another expert has given to us, that is, you know, a recent investigation in how much you know, money is being paid in terms of consultation to tax experts every time, and this is creating now in Denmark quite a scandal. So the same thing happened in the Netherlands. So my question for you is, what is the level of this revolving door or interaction or contiguity between the academic world, that are the people that are supposed to create a system that is fair, that is not so much complex, that is efficient, and you know, the other powers that want it to be complex, and they don't want, you know, advice that are in court or at the parliament in a certain way, because of course there are interests that they have to cover.
So if I may add some nuance to the case of the the Danish finance researchers, I think that I can see how it turned out to be a scandal, but I actually so I'm not part of this organization, I want to say up front, but I don't personally think that it is a big issue, because the payment of money was automated and made subject to transparent criteria. So the institution works in the way that most of the money from the Danish financial sector into the to the payment of additional bonuses to the finance researchers is made contingent on publishing in the finance top 3 journals. So I don't think a quid pro quo is likely to arise in this situation.
Yes, and here I would like to ask, thank you, Benjamin, because this is a very important point, Jesper, from Transparency International. Now that your professional point of view on this, the problem that has emerged in our research is that we look too much at the quid pro quo in a direct exchange of money between a corrupt person, passive and active part of the behavior. Whereas we know that kind of corrupt practices can be based on asymmetric exchange of favors, or just even giving money like that can create an unconscious bias in the people that are, receptive of this money. So just what do you think? Would you have to add something about that?
Yeah, I think it's a very complex situation, and to some of it, I will also say that you have to bear in mind that Denmark is a relatively small country. So, and there has been a general political movement that the universities should be able to make more funding and more private funding. So that has been going on for over a year, lots of years. So that it has also been it's been a part of the politics of the universities to be able to raise more private funding. In general, and first and second. 15 years ago, there was a big reform in the university sector, where before we had a lot of institutions that was, what should we say, a mixture of university and authority, where you had research very close to relevant sectors in the Danish industry. And I know that very closely because I was a part of the negotiations on the health and safety research institution, where we tried to make sure that it was still closely linked to the sector and not been a part of Copenhagen, the University of Copenhagen. And at that time, our philosophy was that we wanted to be close so that it could be relevant for policy making and also relevant for the advice of the industry. And in my point of view, that reform was a mistake, simply because in every country, and also in a country like Denmark, where we want to link research very closely to the legislative procedures, sometimes you need research that is closely linked to the businesses. And what was the mistake was we put it into the major universities, and the major universities, so to speak, the pillars of the research should be more independent. But now we have made a mixture and, so to speak, put lots more private money on targeted research into the big institutions. And I think that was seen from an organizational level a mistake. Having said that, I think some of the problems that you raise here, Costa, arise from another problem, that Denmark is a small country and the political debate in Denmark is very intense, and every nuance that a researcher tried to put into the public debate is always sometimes blown out of proportions in the debate. First, and second, we have a general problem with freedom of expression of public employees, because they are quite nervous to go into the debate, especially because politicians are very sensitive to criticism. So some of the problems that you raise here, I'm not sure that it really has something to do with the private funding. I basically think that some of it has more to do with being a small country and some of the people that your research either criticize or come with another opinion that doesn't fit into your political landscape or your short-term political goals. And that sometimes put the debate out of proportions. And I think that is more that makes lots of researchers more reluctant to take part in discussions and workshops like this that could be used in a political framework than it is a question about funding and that kind of prevention of corruption. That is basically that's the way I see and analyze the situation.
Jasper, this is fantastic. I think you know, of course, it could easily be, as you say, a combination of all these pieces, and the cultural level, the political level, the fact of the dimension of the country is for sure, and these are for sure important elements. You know, it's easily perceivable this, and so thank you for saying this.
And sometimes that also go when I talk to people in Brussels. For example, on politicians and their relation to business. I think that in a country like ours, there's a tendency that you from the outside overestimate the influence of money. That doesn't mean that the incentives is not there. And I think Benjamin, via his research, proved that the incentives are there. But I think that we sometimes should be a little bit reluctant, because I think some of the mechanisms that makes us vulnerable and that make people quiet has something to do with some other mechanism. Because I can definitely recognize and see the same reluctance of researchers to take part of the political debate, but I think it has something to do with something else, and another misuse of power than that follow the money perspective.
Yeah,
if I can use that impression.
Yeah, and I agree, and I totally agree with that. Thank you. This is an important part of the debate, because I think this is an outcome per se that we have to present to the European Commission. As you know, we don't have any member of the authority here with us. They have been conducted, all of them, and they have refused after a long negotiation. And informally, they said that the other, in other countries, they were more courageous. And now I understand, because what you said, what does it mean being more courageous? The country is small, and that's problematic. There is the political issue, and this is very clear. So that's an outcome. We have to work on this, I think, all together in Europe. So thank you so much for that. Let's go ahead. Now, the second level, even maybe more complicated, Jasper and Benjamin, is the political capture. Now, here we are in another realm. So the problem of political capture that exists in many countries, that basically there is a pressure that can be done to implement self-regulatory regimes rather than mandatory ones, unnecessary level of complexity, as you said, in regulation, because this can serve the interests of some big firms. Practice of limiting the scope of criminalization to very clear form of bribes and corruption. So only where there is a quid pro quo, as Benjamin was said, and not looking at corruption in a wider level. Reluctant to adopt effective transparency regimes, especially when we speak about, possibility to move money abroad. And also, of course, if there are legal instruments that are favorable to tax evader, like tax amnesty or negotiated resolutions between corporation and prosecutors. So if this is the case, what do you think is the situation right now? How this kind of political capture is affecting the country, Denmark, and what is possible to be done to ease it?
So I think the development in Denmark in terms of complexity of tax regulation, etc., has been parallel, and the reduction in resources for enforcement has been parallel to the development in many other countries, but it has happened for different reasons. So as we spoke about previously, I think the tendency to overcomplicate taxation in Denmark hasn't been because of lobby pressure from big business, as we've seen in, for instance, the American case. And the reduction in enforcement resources hasn't been for ideological reasons to limit enforcement. It has been as a general push to make public administration more lean. So I don't think that there is basis for saying that the issues with tax enforcement in Denmark are due to political capture. I think many of the issues that are present in other countries and may be present in other countries because of political capture are also present in Denmark, but I don't think they are due to political capture. I think regulatory capture happens in Denmark, but I don't think there is a lot of undue influence on the taxation in Denmark from special interests.
So if I understand well, what you're saying, that the problematic is more regulatory capture rather than affecting the political process. So the political process in a way is not affected so much, whereas at the regulatory level, we have more interactions and this conflict of interest. Is this correct? That's
my impression. And I build it in part on anecdotes, but also in part on what I hear from the lobbyists representing big business organizations, which is that as a general rule, when they try to influence taxation, tax policy, they are not very optimistic when they seek political influence. Where they expect to be successful is when they target the very administrative parts of the rulemaking. And that's because Danish tax law is extremely politicized. And there's a very strong pressure from politicians that follow, in a sense, their own preferences to make it more complex than it has to be.
And if I can add, that has something to do with the way the politicians negotiate the budget. Because there's a general political agreement that the level of taxation should be and stay the same. So every time you come up with a new idea for something that costs money, you have to finance it one by one. And every time that if you lobby for that some taxes should be lowered, you also have to mention what kind of public services can then not be paid for. So there's always in the political negotiations quid pro quo, so to speak, not from personal benefits, but on a general political debate. So if you get a tax reduction on that, what kind of services will we no longer provide? So I think some of the mechanisms that Benjamin here, and I agree with him in the description, also come to the fact how the Danish budget is negotiated once a year, because the Danish politicians are very much like the persons in going around checking the engine in a big ship. They just adjust because the machinery is so complex, but also so very fine-tuned, and that also has an impact on this. And that's why it can be difficult to do the lobby work.
I think this is a fantastic emergence. So if I understood well, we have so it's complicated to affect the system at the political level, and you said very well why. But then what they can do when they want to affect the system is using the difficulties of generated by the macro management of the system, as you very well said, and as Benjamin said, the multi-layered system. So if you go down where there is more contiguity between the administration and the industry, it's easier to work there at that level. That is still a lot of regulation happening, special regulation. Yeah.
But Costa, just to be sure, when you say micromanagement, then you will then I think persons talking about corruption think, okay, this is dangerous, but you have to bear in mind the Danish social contract. And the Danish social contract is that we have a high level of taxation because we have a high level of services. So if businesses is going to get a reduction in the tax, there are poor people who will get a reduction, and it is one by one measured in the political debate. So it's not just taking away money from the big from the big money pockets, but you can always specify that it is this person and this person and this person who will no longer get the social service. And I think that is a part of making the balance that is not as vulnerable when you talk about micromanagement, seen from a corruption perspective.
Yeah, this is
because the consequences is very clear in the political debate.
This is clear to me. So because
okay,
this is very complex at the high level, you know, where you can have to act where this is not happening so much. So I understand it's a very important, but thank you so much. So let's go ahead. Now, if you like just quickly to look at this, the investigating vulnerabilities. I mean, are there some vulnerabilities that you think affect the enforcement agency, how they work? You already said something about the reorganization of the office, and actually this has been used as the motive to say that they cannot send somebody here today because they are reorganizing the office. So you already answered to this. But so what do you think in terms of capability? Is there a discrepancy between the skills of big four, big firms, big lawyers, and what do you think you have right now at the enforcement level in the institutional agency, taking into consideration that for a long time, as you said, they have been underfunded? Has this underfunding creating an imbalance of forces? Because if there is the case, what emerged also in other countries, including the United States, the best minds, the most important expertise is in the private sector. So is this something happening also in Denmark or not?
So I think, almost automatically the defunding of the taxing authority throughout the 2000s decreased the enforcement capabilities of the agency. I think what remains to be seen is whether the refunding has changed that, right? So there's been made a very large investment in refunding and the taxing authority and making the enforcement capabilities of the agency better. I don't think we know yet whether it will be enough, and I mean always. I guess from a societal, from like an internal agency perspective, the enforcement is always underfunded, right? The question is whether we as a society think it is funded enough to catch the level of crime that we are as a society are happy with it, right? And discourage the enough crime. Just as a matter of like automatically given limited budget, they cannot investigate and cannot litigate everything they would want to litigate and investigate as investigators, right? So I think in that sense it will always be underfunded. The question is whether is how to strike the balance, right? And to balance what we invest in the enforcement side against what we will rake in terms of additional revenue. And I don't know, we have changed our position in that balance recently by refunding enforcement, but it remains to be seen where we've ended up in that trade-off, I think.
It's very interesting, and just before giving you the floor, so yes, of course it has to be, Benjamin, a satisfactory level. Okay, it's not a level 100% enforcement. Never, it doesn't exist anywhere, and also a deterrent effect. has to be produced. And Jasper, would you like to add something about it?
Yeah, I think that some of it also has something to do with politics, and that is general. What is best benefit from a political perspective? Are we going to have more police officers in the rural areas where there has been a big centralization, or do we want more bureaucrats in the tax authority, or do we want more investigators in economic crime? What does people see most? Okay, they see the lack of police officers in the rural area. I think it has something to do with the simple politics, where you use more symbolism in the way that you prioritize your resources. So I think that it has one thing to do with it. And second, I think also it has something to do with the prioritization of international crime. And there is in Denmark a reluctance to see our role in what seen from the Transparency International, what we call the corruption chain, steal, hide, spend. There's a reluctance to see that Denmark also plays a vital role in the international enforcement, not just for the benefit of Denmark, but also for the benefit of the economic change in the global economy. And second, when it comes to taxes, and then I go back to my general point, we think in the Danish context, putting money in tax havens is the worst crime ever, and using the Danish tax system as money laundering, we don't care. So we have no problems that we get the money, but we hate it when other people take our money. If you understand.
I mean,
that is because from time to time people say that we from Transparency International that one of the worst things that we've ever done is to make the CPI, making Denmark #1, because then we don't have a problem. So it's, so to speak, that we are in the safe zone, but the safe zone is the dangerous zone because it makes you vulnerable to this, and we don't want to prioritize because we want policemen on the streets.
Yeah, I mean, this is very important, and I totally agree with you. This is a problem that has emerged very clearly to all of us. In general, economic crime is not considered as so serious like crime against direct crime against the property or the people, but in reality, this is a misconception because it can generate much more damage to the society, but we do not perceive it. So Jasper, do you think that is still the case in Denmark? There is still a view that ordinary crime is more important and more, damaging than economic crime?
Yeah.
So we have to work on this, Jasper, and with Transparency International together.
But we have to work on it. But I also have to say that sometimes I think you have to distinguish between also when it comes to tax crime, ordinary tax crime or international tax crime.
I totally agree. Yeah, that's different levels.
But it is very difficult to get the political agreement that we should put more focus on international tax crime than on, so to speak, simple ordinary tax crime.
And the question then, coming back, is because this is calling for that. How much is this political captures, Jasper? How much the difficulties in letting people understand or accept at the political level that the big form of tax, aggressive tax avoidance should be criminalized because they are depriving the society of a huge amount of money. We don't have just to fight against the small tax evasion of an individual that of course is capped there and is easy to be. So that's the issue that has emerged from my research, Jasper.
Yeah, but I think it has something to do with the cases, and that you need the cases to prove the statement. Because for the time being, we are just let me use the money laundering scandal in Danske Bank as an example. With the money laundering scandal in Danske Bank, suddenly money laundering was high on the agenda. Money laundering was the word of Denmark in 2019. And suddenly there was no rule that was too small to get past the parliament, because everybody wanted to do something about money laundering, instead of just say, okay, let's see if we now use the right tools, or if we have made the right prioritization. So to go back to Harry Macmillan, what do you fear most? Events, dear boy, events. So it is about events that will be the driving force if we are going to change the prioritization. And until we have the events, I don't think there will be any change in the politics. Perhaps the situation in Ukraine, Russia, and the world's focus, and the Western world's focus on the kleptocrats can be a door opener or an eye opener to international enforcement of economic crime. We can hope, but perhaps that can be the event that also can open that discussion, and that is what we are very high on our pledge.
Jasper, and building on this and going to the next question that is related to whistleblowing. So in relation to these events, there are other events. All the scandals, unfortunately, we don't have a journalist with us today, but all the scandals related to Pandora paper, Panama paper, all these great scandals that in reality, Jasper and Benjamin, they are events, okay, that demonstrated how this money just vanishes in tax havens and nobody pays anything. And so, besides the Danske Bank scandals and the money laundering scandals that we had all over Europe, the Deutsche Bank, so these are other events. Why all these events are still not, a change is not happening? Is this because the conflict of interest is too entrenched? The interest that of this power and wealth organization is too difficult, because we have events, Jasper. We saw so many of these scandals.
Yeah, but it's not about traditional conflicts of interest. It has something to do with this. This is not where you win the next general election, because this is not top of mind of the people, first, and second, we see them as events and not a part of a systematic problem. And that is basically in the whole way Denmark see on economic crime and corruption. We see them case by case, instead see them and to learn from them from a more systematic perspective.
That's very, very informative. Benjamin, what do you think about this?
I'm unsure, actually. I think it's a good question. I think maybe Jesper is right here, but I think I wanna stay silent on this topic, as I don't know of any good research that explains these things.
Perfectly fine. So jumping into the whistleblowing part. So how do you evaluate the role of whistleblowers in fighting fraudulent and corrupt practices in direct taxation? Is this something that is wide range, is very limited? What is your perception? Should this be important? Why is not, if it is not important, like in the Netherlands? So what do you think?
I think we lack strong whistleblower protection in the Danish context. I think it's been a major part of the public debate for recent years. I think there are arguments on either side for why we should institute stronger protections, and also there's been prominent arguments for why the current lack of protections is good enough, but there are currently no strong whistleblower protections in Denmark. But there have been several attempts to improve the standing of whistleblowers.
Jasper.
I agree with Benjamin, and we passed, as one of the few European countries, we passed the new legislation on whistleblower protection on the EU whistleblower directives, and it was passed here in December. And what we have just decided to do in Transparency International, we've got funding for the project, that we will monitor the implementation very closely, and specifically to see what kind of problems that will arise via the new whistleblower, because in the Danish legislation on the initiative of Transparency International, there is now a provision that every whistleblower team should make a public report on what kind of problems they will find, and we are going to monitor that and make a report on that in mid 2023.
Looking forward to reading this report, of course. Jasper, what I would like to ask you, if you can speak about that. I mean, the possibility of implementing national law directive in the national law gave the opportunity to Denmark to do exact implementation or to go even beyond. So a higher level of protection. What was the, in general, on average, the choice, that level or above?
Above.
Okay, so that's good.
Because the EU directive was limited to the sectors covered by the Treaty of the European Union, and Denmark chose the horizontal level.
So basically, the enlargement has been in relation to the scope of application.
Yeah.
And in terms of the level of protection, the same or?
It's the same.
The same. So same level of protection, but wider scope. That is already, I think, a victory.
Yeah, but and to be honest, you also have to bear in mind what is the nature of whistleblowing. I mean, I have been speaking to many whistleblowers, and they are courageous people, but they are also involved. And every time I talk to a journalist that has talked to a whistleblower, I always ask them, and do you know why they did the whistleblowing? No person acts without some sort of incentives. And a lot of people argue that whistleblowers should have anonymity, or they should have more compensation. But you can also see, for example, in the Danske Bank, the whistleblower was because there was an economic incentives for him to become a whistleblower. So I think that sometimes in the public debate, there is a tendency that we say, oh, whistleblowers are saints from heaven. They are not. They need protection, and they need the right protection. But you can't say that all protection is for the good. You have to find the right balance. And then when I say that, I speak in accordance with also the position of the Danish Whistleblowers Association, because they are very well aware of these delicate balances.
Jasper, on that, so if you can, because this is a very important point that emerged in the research. So two elements here. What important motives? So we know that people, they are not saints. We don't have saints on earth. So if you pretend them to be saints, you are in the wrong position. And at the same time, that's first the importance of motives. And the second one is, what about when whistleblowers are in a way involved in the issue that they're speaking about? So what's your perspective on this? Importance of motives, irrelevant?
No, I think that the motives is relevant, and what I think is we work in Transparency International. We have worked very closely with big industries on the whistleblowers protection, because some of the big industries on their heads of compliance, they say to me, Jesper, our staff is also driving too quick, too fast. Our staff is also doing tax fraud in their private life, having moonlighting, cleaning service, whatever. There's no such thing as all of them are suddenly saints when they are going in our door in the morning and being in the company itself. So lots of compliance people, they have a very good attitude, because they know problem happens where, and faults are happening where people are. So basically, I think that what we are going to do is that we have to take the philosophy of compliance from some of the best big industries also in Denmark, big companies with the right values and KPIs on compliance, and use some of their tools and instruments and values in general on these matters, because they are very focused on internal fraud. So if you're very focused on your internal fraud, you're also focused on your external fraud. So I think it's that mechanism we have to activate, so to speak.
Benjamin, any comment about what do you think about the situation of whistleblowing and how this can be improved in Denmark?
So I think, I mean, whistleblowing is outside of my area of expertise, but I, as a general point, I think that there has been a reluctance among Danish politicians, as I said before, to institute strong protections in Denmark. We have implemented the EU directive on whistleblowing, but I think it is too soon to say anything about how it has affected compliance of corporations. So it's, I mean, it's mainly effective for large firms, and well, we don't know if this will change the behavior of firms in relation to illicit activities or tax or anything like that yet. I think it remains to be seen whether it's an effective tool.
Benjamin, to get again to your point, so what you're saying that without the directive, a turning point would have been very complicated to be adopted on whistleblowing in the jurisdiction. So no directive, no change.
That is my, I mean, it's difficult to speculate about those things, but my sense is that this happened as an implementation of the directive, and it probably wouldn't have happened absent the directive. But I mean, Jesper, what's your impression?
I agree with you, but having said that, I also think that there is a shift in the public opinion on whistleblowing, because there was very heavy against whistleblowing 5 years ago, and now we see it in a more positive way. And
why is that, Jasper?
I think it has something to do, for example, also with Danske Bank, and also a general awareness. And I'm quite sure when you do this exercise in an Eastern European country, they remember the communist regime on whistleblowing, and they have big problems, and much bigger problems than we have here on the whole concept of whistleblowing. First,
just for we had the same problem not only in Eastern countries, but also countries that had fascism or similar regimes, Nazism, so Germany and Greece.
But also one of the problems that we had on whistleblowing in Denmark has something to do with this cooperative attitude, because a lot of the people who was against it was, or the organizations, was the trade unions, because they saw these cases as their cases, as a part of their claim to fame, so to speak. And they have also been, over the last 2 or 3 years, a change in their attitude to whistleblow, because they were campaigning heavily against whistleblower regimes, because they saw it as a competition to their, so to speak, raison d'être. But a part of their change has also been a part of that people now see whistleblowing in a more positive way in general.
This is very interesting. So the combination effect of the scandals plus the trade union change of perspective, that is very interesting, because in the United States, for example, for the police whistleblowing, a fantastic article just said that the problem is the trade union, because they go against the police whistleblowers, incredibly to say, but this happens. So yeah, you're right. Now, the last question, and then an open question. The last question, very briefly, corporate crime for tax evasion and corrupt practices in the area of taxation. Is that well developed? in your jurisdiction? Can a corporation be criminally sanctioned because it involves in tax frauds or no?
The short answer is yes.
Is that effective, you think? Is an effective
No,
system?
that's a fact. We have in the Danish tax law that is not only physical persons but also legal persons that can be punished.
Criminal with the criminal penalties.
Yeah, and that is general in all administrative regulation that the legal person can be penalized. Yeah.
And from an empirical perspective, as far as you know, is this happening enough that they are criminalized for tax evasion, the corporations?
When I have no indication that it is not dealt with in that way when relevant.
Okay, Benjamin, would you like to add something?
Oh.
Pietro, on all these aspects that we covered so far, any question or comment if you are asked to the experts?
But first, I want to thank you because I really listened with a huge attention and really appreciated the focus we had today on Denmark. And when we had the workshop on Italy, I was telling about my a trip I had in Denmark before pandemic started in February 2020, and when Costantino asked me what I could do to change our legal system with a wand, I said that we could adopt the system you have in Denmark with the use of cash. I mean, when I was there, I never used the cash. I don't have a coin with me just to remember and remind that was my trip there. And for me as Italian and as a researcher was a really good perspective to understand how we can effectively fight against the tax crimes in general. But on the other hand, also through my research, I saw that, for example, if I have to imagine something for Denmark, and that's my question, in order to make the system more effective, in your future, do you see higher cooperation with the European Anti-Fraud Office, the so-called OLAF? And do you think that this institution, European institution, can also help Denmark in getting better and better compliant with the European Union system in fighting tax crimes and also fiscal corruption in the future?
I think that Denmark, as you know, has a reservation on the cooperation on legal affairs within the Treaty of the European Union. So for political reasons, that is difficult. And we can also see that the cooperation between Danish authorities and this new, not just Olaf, but the new prosecutor's office has not started yet, even though the prosecutor's office has asked Denmark to start up the procedure. So I think that this is an area where Denmark has to step up, and that has something to do with our involvement in international enforcement of international law. And there's a tendency that Denmark is not a fully integrated partner in that cooperation. And some of it has to do with political matters, and it also has something to do with our reservation. And again, it is my hope that now we have this very, very sad situation in Ukraine, But it is my hope that this new focus on fighting and finding the kleptocrats and the assets, that could be a game changer in Denmark's commitment to international enforcement of economic crime.
I think that it is quite clear that a lot more transnational activities have to be integrated into our enforcement practices. And when we look at where the Danish system is vulnerable, it is to a large degree to those transnational issues. And as I said earlier, one of the issues that we're facing in Danish enforcement practices is that in some situations the enforcement agencies lack the jurisdiction, or they do not view it as their job, even when they do have jurisdiction to deal with transnational issues. And so I think those issues are some of those issues should be dealt with in a transnational way, and some of those issues are best dealt with by changing the culture and the perceptions of the enforcement agencies. I think I agree with Jesper's points that I think Denmark will, for various political reasons, have issues with fully integrating into institutions like Olaf, but we'll see what happens in the future, I think.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Pietro, for this question, and Jasper and Benjamin for the answer. The last question is, I have to pass you the magic wand now. And exactly this is the last question. So if you had a magic wand, Benjamin and Jasper, to improve the Danish system in fighting tax crime and corrupt practices related to tax crime, you can change something. What you will change?
I would change the perspective. That we see it, as long as we use tax to finance what we want, we don't have problems where the money comes from, and basically that we will take our global responsibility.
Very good point, Benjamin. You have the magic wand.
That's a difficult question. I think I would focus on the complexity of the Danish tax legislation, and I think that there's a lot to be gained in dramatically reducing the complexity and the necessity for making rules in the Danish tax system. I think this is also probably one of the hardest goals to achieve at all, because it derives, the complexity derives from the political equilibrium in Denmark, and the necessity for rulemaking is a direct function of the complexity of the Danish tax legislation. So just speaking in the abstract, I think if I had a magic wand, I think that's the part I would change. I think if I could go into detail with how to use the magic wand to decrease complexity, I think I would probably be the most successful politician in Denmark.
Fantastic. So thank you so much, Jasper and Benjamin. It was a fantastic workshop. Thank you so much, Pietro and Alex. He had to go, but thank you so much. Thank you, Lorenzo, for co-investigating these issues with me. And thank you, Stephen, for supporting us all the time. So I stop the recording now.